Hey guys, today I've got a how-to video for you. I'm going to demonstrate a technique called pin and stretch. And as much as there are steps that you should follow for this technique, I always am going to encourage you to figure out what works best for you, follow your own path, and of course get some butter along the way because butter makes it better. I'll include the link in the description below. So the basic idea of a pin and stretch is to take a muscle that you're targeting, shorten it, pin it down, and then stretch it out. Okay, great video. Done. Good job, you guys. No, not so fast. Okay, so the first muscle I'm going to demo this technique on is the rhomboids, which is a trickier muscle to demo on, but why not? So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you can actually shorten and lengthen the muscle that you're targeting. For the rhomboids, I'm going to take my client's arm and place it on her low back, and this gives me access to moving the scapula around, since the scapula is the more moving attachment site of the rhomboids. If you can't get your client's arm on her low back, you can always place it on the table. That's a little easier position for people who might have shoulder issues, but for the rhomboids, what I'm going to do here is push the scapula closer to the spine, pin it down. I'm using my left thumb in this instance, and then I'm going to take my right hand and pull the scapula away from the spine, therein stretching out the rhomboids. So what this does is, as I'm pinning the muscle down and stretching it out, it's really giving the muscle a deeper stretch than it's able to get on its own if the client were to do it or if I were to passively stretch her. So in essence, I can target where I want to pin and stretch out from there, creating different elements of stretch within different fibers of your targeted muscle. You can even throw in a little friction at the end, a little myofascial release, trigger point therapy, whatever you want to do to make it your own. Kind of like I was saying at the beginning, this is your kitchen. Throw in whatever ingredients you want. The next muscle I'm going to highlight to demo this technique is the infraspinatus, and the main job, or one of the main jobs of this muscle, is to pull the arm into lateral rotation. So I want to make sure I have the arm off the table so that I can swing her lower arm like a lever, making sure that the humerus is being pulled into medial rotation as I pin this muscle down. So I've got my right thumb on the infraspinatus. This happens to be a really good spot that holds, coincidentally, a lot of trigger points. And as I pin down this muscle, I'm pulling her arm into medial rotation, which is going to be the opposite of the action, which is then going to stretch this muscle out. So again, I'm pinning it down with my thumb and using my left hand to lever her arm up, pulling the humerus into medial rotation, stretching the infraspinatus out, and getting that good pin and stretch. I'm switching everything here on you guys. Not only did I switch the camera angle, but I've also switched my hands, just so that you guys know you can switch it up for yourselves if you're starting to feel like one thumb is getting tired or you're having problems doing this move from one position. I've now got my left thumb into her infraspinatus, and I'm using my right hand to pull her arm into medial rotation, which is stretching out the infraspinatus as I pin it down. And again, I encourage you to play around with where you actually pin that muscle down. The infraspinatus is wide and has lots of different fibers, so take your time and move through this muscle methodically. Moving down her arm and into the triceps, I'm extending her elbow to shorten these fibers, and then as I pin them down with my right hand, I'm using my left hand to flex the elbow, stretching the muscle tissue out, and then adding on an extra connective tissue stretch at the end. So I'm not just stretching the muscles out here by passively moving her forearm, but I'm also dragging the tissue up towards her shoulder, creating a nice deep myofascial stretch at the end. And then, of course, I just worked three muscles that are closely related to each other, the rhomboids, the infraspinatus, and the triceps. So I want to shake out her shoulder before I bring her arm back into a neutral position. Moving down into the leg for the next part of this demo, do I really want the bolster under her ankle? Nope, I don't. I chose to take the bolster out because I do want her knee to extend all the way straight. The hamstrings do two main actions, extension of the hip and flexion of the knee, and I'm going to focus on flexion of the knee for this tutorial. So as I bring her leg up towards her glutes, I'm sinking in with my left hand and using my right hand to allow her leg to fall flat. And once her lower leg is down onto the table, I can use my right hand to hook into the ankle to push down away from her body. And as I do that, I'm going to sink in with my left hand and slide up towards the ischial tuberosity, getting that deeper myofascial stretch that comes with this specific pin and stretch technique. So clearly, with the soft fist that I've got my left hand in, I'm creating a broader point of contact into the hamstrings, which addresses more tissue at the same time, and I can move that around from medial to lateral and vice versa, from lateral to medial. But I can also take away that broader point and use a more specific point like a thumb or a finger and create more definition and more separation of the three hamstring muscles that are coming down from the hip to the knee. So obviously, as I was yammering away about the hamstrings, I've moved down to the calves, and I've chosen to keep the bolster out, but instead use my own leg to lift her ankle up higher to where it would have been with the bolster. And what this does is it allows me access to greater range of motion for her ankle. So I can manipulate her ankle into dorsiflexion, which really stretches out the calves, allowing me a deeper stretch when it comes to the stretch part of this technique. As for the pin part, I'm using my thumb first, and I'm moving it around to explore different parts of the soleus, the lateral and medial bellies of the gastrocnemius, but I can also use a broad point of contact, so I'm sinking in with my forearm here. I'm going to shorten the calf muscles first by bringing her ankle into plantar flexion, sink down with my forearm, and then stretch those muscles out, pulling her ankle into dorsiflexion. So as I do that, I can slide up the calf and stretch out all of those muscles, all of that connective tissue, and create a nice relief for these lower leg muscles. Back up to the arm, I'm going to drop into the biceps a little bit. And similar to the hamstrings, the biceps cross over two joints, the shoulder and the elbow. And I'm just going to focus on the action at the elbow, which is flexion. So as I bring her arm out at a 90-degree angle away from her body, I'm going to start by bringing her wrist towards her shoulder, shortening the muscle. And then as I pin it down with my palm, I'm sinking down into the biceps and stretching those muscles out as I extend the elbow straight. Again, just to reiterate, I can sink in with a broad point of contact like I'm doing here with my palm, and at the end of that stretch, increase that myofascial release as I slide my work up towards her shoulder, or I can sink in with more specific work. So using my thumb to pin down any fibers that might feel a little more tense or tight than other fibers, or adhesions along the connective tissue within the fibers, I can more pointedly address dysfunctions that are going on within the bicep as opposed to the entirety of the muscle. But all of this is going to depend on what you feel like the client needs in the moment or what the client feels like they are wanting to get out of the session. Side note, as you're finishing this work into the biceps, it's really helpful to provide traction on the wrist, keeping that shoulder nice and open. Giving the shoulder and the upper attachments of the biceps a little love before I move down to the lower arm. Now that I'm in the forearm, I want to focus on the wrist extensors. So these are the muscles that pull your fingers and your wrist back up towards your elbow. So if I were to kind of hold my wrist and getting ready to carry a tray, these would be the muscles pulling my hand back and getting my palm open and ready. So in order to stretch these muscles out, I'm going to pull my client's wrist down into flexion. So this is the action that you might see somebody doing if they were trying to create a wall shadow of a dog. The extensors originate at the lateral epicondyle of the elbow, so I'm pinning those muscles down and pulling her wrist into flexion, stretching out each of those muscles, and again playing around with positioning that point of contact in different areas along the extensors. These are lots of little muscles that do a lot of work in the hand and wrist, and a lot of people hold tension in there that they have no idea even exists, and this work can feel really relieving. Of course, if you feel like there is more that needs to be done in this area for your client, walk your own path, throw in your own ingredients, paint your own canvas, all of that stuff. You are the professional and this is your client. The last muscle I'm going to highlight for this video is the tibialis anterior, and because this muscle is really difficult to stretch, I think that the pin and stretch technique is one of the best techniques applied to this area. So I'm going to start by bringing her ankle into dorsiflexion, and I'm using my right thumb here to pin down the belly of the tibialis anterior. And as I pull her ankle down into plantar flexion, stretching out the muscle, I'm getting some compression into the tissues as they stretch. And like I said before, adding in that myofascial stretch, sliding up towards her knee, is going to create movement and blood flow and health in this muscle that probably hasn't seen this amount of movement in a long time. After all, happy muscles mean happy clients. Hey guys, if you like this video and you want to see more content like this, please consider heading over to my Patreon page. The support I get from Patreon makes it possible for me to do these videos, and I'm always trying to dive in deeper and create better content for you that is educational, interesting, and entertaining. So click on the link, check it out, and I hope to see you over there.